I'm not a securities lawyer.
You're not the ultimately one
I have to interrupt the
responsible.
gentleman.
Okay.
We have
Thank
votes,
you.
and we have other members that too have not had an opportunity. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, you were delighted.
I thank the Chairman. Again, Mr. Lewis, thank you for being here this morning. Several questions. One is, when did you decide that the financial losses being incurred by Merrill Lynch should be disclosed to your shareholders?
Again, I don't decide on disclosures. We have securities lawyers, and many times they talk to outside external counsel to determine that.
Well, presumably I worked for a company. Presumably you, as the CEO, are in on those conversations.
No, they come to me, and they are done.
Right. So when did that happen? When was the decision made, and how was it made to disclose or not to disclose to the shareholders of your company?
We disclosed the losses at Merrill Lynch consistent with disclosing the agreement we had with the government and consistent with us announcing our earnings on January the 16th.
January. Mm-hmm. Why such a long delay?
Again, I'm not a securities lawyer. That is when we announced according to the schedules given to us by our lawyers.
Were you ever encouraged or pressured by anyone at the U.S. Treasury or by the Federal Reserve not to disclose until January?
No, we were working on a goal of getting everything done at once.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
We were working on a goal of getting everything done at once so that we didn't have an announcement of something that would cause more damage to the economy. But nobody ever told us that we should not disclose a disclosable event.
So, for example, nobody at the Federal Reserve and no one at the United States Treasury urged you to manage the timing of the disclosure so that Merrill's earnings and the receipt of TARP money were all disclosed in January?
The target was to do that so that we didn't damage the economy anymore.
So there were discussions about that with the U.S. Treasury and with the Federal Reserve?
It was about announcing everything at once.
I understand, but the timing is interesting. Let's announce it in January, not in December. Was there something critical that had happened on the Wall Street that made it better in January than December?
There was not an agreement in December.
I'm sorry?
There was not an agreement in December.
There was not an agreement among whom?
Among us being the Federal Reserve or the Treasury.
So there were discussions, but not an agreement in December.
There were discussions, but not an agreement, yes.
Did those discussions involve the Secretary of Treasury himself and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve himself?
Yes, they did.
And yourself?
Yes, they did.
And the agreement was, let's hold off until January because we're not in agreement yet about what to disclose and when to disclose it?
We did not have an agreement, and we had not agreed on all the details or the amounts.
Were the reports that you were reluctant to accept TARP funds true?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
There was a report that you did not want to accept TARP funding. Is that correct?
It is true that we did not think we needed the TARP funds at the time we were asked to take them.
And was there any connection between your reluctance in accepting them and the exhortation from Secretary Paulson at that time to accept them and the issue of don't disclose the $12 billion worth of losses you've just discovered?
No, absolutely not.
It never came up?
No.
Why did you accept TARP funds if you didn't think you needed them?
Because after hearing the various regulators, I felt like, given what they were saying about the potential for deterioration in the economy, that we should have a healthy fear of the unknown.
How much in TARP funds did you accept, Mr. Lewis?
$15 billion.
That's a lot of money for insurance against the unknown, especially if your initial reaction was we don't need them.
Right. Yes, but if you then see that credit meltdown of epic proportions that happened in the fourth quarter, it may not have been such a big insurance policy after all.
My time is almost up. One final question. Greg Curl replaced Amy Brinkley as BOA's Chief Risk Officer. Given the fact that Mr. Curl failed to notice $12 billion of Merrill Lynch's losses, is it wise to have Mr. Curl be your Chief Risk Officer, and did you approve of that decision?
Mr. Curl didn't miss the instruments which caused the loss. What happened is we did not anticipate the meltdown of such significant proportions in the fourth quarter. So he'd identified everything properly. No one thought things would get as bad as it did in the fourth quarter, and I made that decision.
You made the decision that Mr. Curl should go ahead to become the CRO.
To become the COO. The CRO.
Thank you. My time is up.
Let me thank you, too. Let me announce that we have 2 votes on the floor and that we will recess until 12:30, and we will return at 12:30 and, of course, continue the questions. So the committee is in recess until 12:30.